All right, welcome everybody, and thanks for carving out the time to join us today. I'm Dr. Patrick O'Malley, the founder of Shift Change, and your moderator for today. So, for anyone who is joining us for the first time, I want to welcome you to the Shift Change community. It is an entrepreneurial space for us all to be able to get together, share ideas, connect, and collaborate alongside clinician entrepreneurs and subject matter experts. And for today's discussion, have the great fortune of being led by Ilana Gotlib, who is an attorney and an MBA and has expertise with guiding clinician entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs from all walks of life through the entire process from defining what their idea is to building their business and then looking for an exit strategy. And I'll put all of Alana's contact information in the chat, and also to let folks know that she is a Shift Change member and is one of the panel members for our monthly Pitch Slap events. So, Ilana, I will turn it over to you. Thank you for being here, and looking forward to this discussion.
Thank you so much, Patrick. So, hi, everyone. I know that we only have a couple of faces on camera, but there's a lot of folks that are in the meeting. So, I'm going to share some slides, but obviously, with a small group, I want this to be interactive. I'm not really like a hold your questions until the end kind of gal. So, please feel free to stop me at any point along the way. But first, I'm going to try to share my slides, and I'm going to figure out if Zoom is going to work for me. That's the technology is always the hardest part of the day. So just bear with me for 1 second. Right. Just figure out how I can still see you guys. One second. All right. Can you guys see a big
Yes.
blue slide, or what can you guys see?
Yep, that's it.
All right, perfect. Let me make sure I can still see your faces as well. It wouldn't be a virtual meeting without some technical issues, right?
That's right.
All right, perfect. Okay, so thanks everyone for having me here today. Maybe before jumping in, I just wanted to give you a sense of who I am. I got introduced to Patrick just a few months ago when I learned about this amazing community that he's building. And so I'm really thankful for the opportunity to be here and to meet all of you. But this is who I am. I like to say, as you kind of scroll through this, I like to say that I'm a lawyer in recovery. I practiced law for a number of years in Philadelphia, which is where I'm originally from. Did all litigation, but really gravitated towards the healthcare space. So a lot of products liability, medical malpractice, and as there's obviously a lot of docs and healthcare professionals on the phone, I was mostly on the defense side. So rest assured, I was one of the good guys representing institutions and physicians. I made a little bit of a pivot in my career, decided to go back and get my MBA, which is what brought me up to Boston, which is where I am now. And pretty much since then, I've been in the med device, med tech space. Have mostly worked for big companies. Started out at J&J at DePuy Synthes, which is the orthopedics part of the company. Moved over to Philips, and then most recently at Stryker. And so had a number of different roles on downstream marketing, upstream marketing, strategic marketing, partnerships, and then moved to M&A and business development sort of roles. And it's really where I felt like I could exercise kind of the business part of my brain and still the legal part of my brain, and really just fell in love with that sort of work. So that's just a little bit about me. All right, so this is actually the way that I'd kick off a meeting with a client or a prospective client or in a presentation. Obviously, I'm in the healthcare space, but some of these statistics kind of translate and you can extrapolate to other industries. But you can see there are hundreds of new companies entering the market every month. And it's probably a higher number than you would guess. And it has been taking longer to secure funding than in the 30 years prior. And there's lots of different statistics out there. Typically, seed to Series A, it's about 50% longer. Series A to Series B can actually be twice as long as it was just 5 years ago. And then B to C is about 25% longer. The good news is that there is so much that is within your control and how you can increase your chances of success. And the difference is really rarely the data. It's the story, it's the preparation, it's the planning, and really surrounding yourself with the right team and the right people. So I'm not going to read through all these bullets, but throughout my career, I was constantly meeting companies in either discovery calls, partnership discussions, industry conferences, society meetings. And most often the companies that I was meeting with, they came up with a technology that wasn't necessarily just like an incremental, a Me Too product. It was folks who had deep domain expertise, building really interesting differentiated technology, and deeply committed to solving the real problems in healthcare. And unfortunately, a lot of these conversations wouldn't get past the first 30 minutes. I'd be meeting with these companies, and it would be hard to figure out exactly what they were building, exactly how they're going to make money, and most importantly, how I, as a strategic or as an acquirer, would make money off of this deal. So you'd kind of give the polite, hey, it was great to meet you. Congratulations. See you at the next society meeting. And maybe you'd meet them 6 months later or a year later. Fundamentally, the CEOs or the founders or the co-founders, these technical folks didn't really understand what investors or what strategics are looking for and how decisions are made across the value chain and the healthcare ecosystem. So after I saw this pattern kind of over and over and over again, I decided to create ILG Consulting. It's just my initials, but really to help founders and leadership teams translate complex innovation into clear, compelling business stories that resonate with investors, partners, and the right decision makers. So I'm not going to go through all of these bullets, but really I have what I call three like pillars to my work. The first is around communicating your value in the right way, matching your vision to your execution, and then being laser focused on your partnership strategy. Now, you don't always need to know that you want to exit a company or sell a company for a certain valuation when you first found your company, but you want to be thinking through certain variables and certain questions because it will help you make decisions along the way as you're building your company, as you're building your team. So thinking about those possibilities early on in the process is really going to make you stronger, and make your company better. I'm really thoughtful about not being your general med device consultant. There's lots of people out there that say, "Oh, I can help you with your regulatory and your reimbursement strategy and your go-to-market and your sales education and professional education training." I am not one of those folks. In fact, I'm trying to be really laser focused on the things that I've experienced in, that I enjoy doing, and that I'm good at, and then surrounding myself with really good, smart people so that if you as an entrepreneur come to me, I can say, you know what, I'm not your reimbursement gal, but you know who is Jane Smith. Or I'm not your clinical expert, but you know who is Catherine here on the phone. So I'm trying to be really, really thoughtful about that as I'm building kind of a community very similar to what Patrick is building with this community as well, with lots of just good, smart people here. So quick agenda. I thought I'd just run through a couple of these things. There's only, a few slides in each section, but again, feel free to stop me. Okay, so a couple of basics. Wanted to start with a little bit of a reality check. Everyone gets really jazzed about venture capital dollars. It sounds sexy, and most founders think that it is a validation of your team and your technology. In reality, less than 1% of companies ever get VC money. And this isn't necessarily like a healthcare med device statistic. This is across the board. It's as simple as these folks are getting 100x, they follow up with 10 companies, and they invest in one. There's a lot of different statistics on where and how VCs invest. If you have an all male team, you're getting almost 80% of all VC dollars. If you have a mixed team, it's a little bit closer to 18 or so. And if you have an all female team, it's less than 2%. And if you have an all female team and it's a female product or some sort of product or technology geared towards women, it's 2% of that 2%. So just some interesting kind of statistics that are out there. The majority of folks, so what does that mean? The majority of folks have to raise from other sources that are out there. So you can see angels, and we'll talk a little bit about kind of what that means in a minute. But you can see the percentage from angel investors, and you can see that more than 90% are, and I wrote exclusively because that means outside of VCs, but are exclusively relying on all of these other sorts of avenues and folks to fundraise from. So just keep all of that in mind because I feel like the VC space has kind of exploded in the last 5 to 10 years or so. And I feel like it's all that I hear about from entrepreneurs is like, can you introduce me to a VC? Can you introduce me to a VC? And I say, whoa, before we talk about that, let's think about the entire world. And before we think about that, and I'll tell you why in just a second. So I can't see like hands and everything because most people are off screen. But I'm not sure if everyone is familiar with the two different types of capital. So I just wanted to give like a very quick overview to what that means. On the left is non-dilutive, which means you are keeping ownership of the company. And the line really represents increasing difficulty. On the right, you're giving up ownership of your company. And the line represents increasing difficulty, scarcity, and also the increased cost to you as an entrepreneur, as a CEO. Again, I'm not going to go through all of these individual ones, but I just wanted to call out a couple of things that you guys may or may not be aware of or taking advantage of for your businesses. Pitch contests and incubators. These can actually be amazing opportunities. It can feel like a grind sometimes showing up to these pitch contests when you get 1 minute, 5 minutes, 8 minutes to talk, but you can actually make some real money at these events. And going into these events and these opportunities with good preparation will set you apart. I've seen hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of companies show up to these different pitch events, whether it's formal for some sort of dollars at the end of the day or informal just for opportunities to meet with investors. And you can absolutely see the difference in preparation. I've seen a ton of these where I think, my goodness, like, did anyone even proofread your slides for you? I still don't really know what you're building and why you're building it. And you spent 4.5 of your 5 minutes talking about the algorithm or talking about the widget, and I have no idea why you're building that widget. Government grants. This can be challenging in today's climate, but there is money out there. And there's also a couple of major benefits to these sorts of grants. The first is around validation and credibility. Government backing can really attract investors. It becomes kind of like a stamp of approval of the technology, some of the quality and regulatory kind of consideration. So it gives kind of a nice stamp to it. The government is also supporting cutting edge innovation. They're focused on high risk, high reward technologies. And then also just the pathway to commercialization. So when you think about how you're actually developing a product in conjunction or with some of these government dollars, it could directly lead to government contracts. So again, as you're developing your product, your tech, think about all the different applications and think about whether this is something that could live in the VA, the DoD, some of these big agencies. I'll just kind of lastly wrap up with a point about VCs. As most of you know, they operate on this power law. They expect that the majority of their investments are going to fail. So a tiny fraction of their portfolio must actually generate these crazy outsized returns of like 100x. They are looking for the unicorns. They're looking for the billion-dollar valuations. And so depending on what your goal as a CEO is, that might not fit within their goals and their deal thesis. If your goal is to build a $10 million business, a $20 million business, or a family business, it will be, even if you get into that VC and get some of those dollars, it will be actively discouraged by these investors that are asking you to kind of swing for the fences and do bigger things. So I don't want to rag on VCs completely. VC money isn't bad. It just comes with a cost that a lot of CEOs kind of underestimate in terms of expectations, misaligned timelines, and a board that could just have very different incentives than you do. So when you're early, you think that capital always equates to freedom. And later you realize that capital equates to obligation as well. So the smart CEOs, the smart entrepreneurs are thinking about everything on the left, thinking about everything on the right. They don't see fundraising as like a point in time. They see it as something that takes place over their journey as a company as well. It really is a marathon, not a sprint. Maybe I should say it that way. Okay, all right. I guess I'm going to put Catherine on the spot since you're the only face that I can see right now. But um, I just wanted to ask, a question. So, when I start fundraising, how much should I be asking for? All right, Patrick, you're on here too. Maybe I'll pick on both of you.
Okay.
All right. So here are the potential answers. So, how much should I be asking for? So, A, as much as possible. B, enough for 12 to 18 months of run. C, enough to reach your next major inflection point. D, enough to cover a ping pong table, your cold brew, and matching Patagonia vest for your team. I see a thumbs up to that one. And then E, as little as possible to not give up too much equity. So, what do you guys think?
I think this is spectacular. I mean, obviously D is the most correct answer.
Obviously.
But second to that, um, I think it just depends on your goal, right? Like I never know how to answer these questions until I know what the goal is. Is the goal a quick exit? Is the goal to transfer it over to a bigger player as soon as possible with as little development as possible? Or is the goal to become the next Meta and Facebook of your industry, right?
Okay.
And so to me, it just depends. And I know that's kind of a cop-out answer, but that's what I'm going with. It depends.
Okay. Okay. It depends. Patrick, how about you? You guys have had to take a lot of standardized tests. I feel like B is usually the right answer, but what do you guys think? Oh, Patrick, you're on mute.
Yeah, my first thought was E. And then as Catherine was talking, I was like, oh, yeah, that's a good point. It kind of depends on what your situation is.
Okay.
And yeah, but I'll
Okay.
stick with E.
Okay, I like it. So
I'll,
I'll
oh,
tell you guys what. Oh, go ahead.
sorry. Since I'm in the middle of doing this is
Oh,
Manny, by the way. Sorry, I'm not
Hi, Manny.
oh,
on
that's okay.
video.
Sorry, I just couldn't see you.
But since I'm in the middle of doing this right now, I'll tell you that the answer that speaks to me is B, because if you've already made a decision to raise funds, you've kind of already decided your path to do it. And what I think investors want to hear is that you are going to have discipline to use the funds that they're going to give you to get to a certain way, a certain place. So that 12 to 18 months is what they'd like to hear. I think all the answers have a lot of validity to them, but that's the one that I anchored on.
Yeah.
It's almost like I was trying to make this a little bit tricky to stimulate conversation, guys. All right, so maybe we'll start. I'll tell you guys the one that I had picked as the right answer, but maybe we'll start with a couple of the definitely wrong answers that nobody picked. So I don't think anybody picked A. A lot of entrepreneurs get really excited about like, I want to raise as much as I can at this point. But the problem is it artificially inflates your post-money valuation right out of the gate. If you take on a massive amount of cash, the expectations for your growth become incredibly steep. And if you fail to grow into that huge valuation by the time you need to raise money again, you're staring down a down round. The other issue is that having so much cash often leads to really undisciplined spending rather than focused execution. And so it becomes actually really difficult to show capital efficiency, which is like the buzzword du jour of investors. And so that's a challenge about just raising a huge amount of money right at the beginning. Maybe I'll jump to D because I don't think anyone really picked D, obviously. This one is silly. But I will say that investors are hypersensitive to paying for what they call like startup culture. And I've seen investors push back on things as silly as hearing that one of their teams, that one of their opcos did like a team building day and saying things like, why are we paying for you guys to go offsite, for you guys to go build a team? Go build your team and go build your product in the office.
Mhm.
And so there's this like hypersensitivity. So thinking through how to present what you're spending your money on, how you're spending your money is actually hugely important. I'll say um, E is probably the next um, less right answer. And I think Patrick, you kind of gravitated towards E, and I totally get that. Um, in terms of some benchmarks, at each round you're giving up anywhere between 15 to 20% of equity. So the problem with E is that founders often kind of starve the company of resources at the beginning to avoid dilution. So they leave no room for error and they
Mhm.
actually like fail to reach the next milestone. They're so protective of their equity that they're doing barely enough to scrape by. And it's kind of like the analogy of finding the person dead in the desert and they still have like a full water pack. And it's
Uh,
because they're trying to save, right? And so if you're falling short of your next milestone because you ran out of money, you are not going to be successful. You're not going to be able to raise. And so you're going to own, 100% or 90 or 80% of a dead company, right? So there's definitely that balance. I'll go to what I thought was the um, most correct, but still in my mind, kind of the second choice, and that was B. The 12 to 18 months for run. And here's why I kind of put that in as a little bit of a red herring, for a couple of reasons. Number one, your run rate is going to get longer with each round. So at the beginning, it might be 12 to 18 months. As you get to like A and then B and then C, it's going to be more like 18 to 20 years, 18 to 24 months, excuse me. So those windows kind of expand. The other reason is that it's a pretty artificial milestone, picking 12 to 18 months. Yes, it's always good to build in some buffer, but investors are not just thinking about funding calendars, they're thinking about milestones and value creation and what can you do at each of these different intervals. So your focus, and I use this phrase a lot, but you should be thinking about value to valuation and ensuring that the money that you get at any point along this journey is required to increase the worth of the company and not just keeping your lights on for X amount of days. Um, and so sometimes it's really just in that language of how you're presenting things. And so the answer that I had picked was C. And it's all about kind of bridging the gap and actually bridging a couple of the different things that we had talked about. You need enough money to hit the next milestone, whether that's a partnership, a prototype, regulatory clearance, plus enough buffer. But the really smart way to do it is to say, hey, not only is this going to give us 12 months of run, not only are we going to get to this next major inflection point, but we are also de-risking the technology and the company with this additional $500,000 that we're asking for. And we're de-risking it from a regulatory standpoint, a commercial standpoint, a clinical standpoint, what have you. But even that shift in language of it's not just what it's going to fund for us, but what it's going to de-risk for you and for our team, is a really great way to sell it. And it's talking about how you are a good steward of their money, which is really what everybody wants to see. But thank you for all the answers. They all obviously have a little bit of value. And I agree, Catherine, that they kind of change and it depends on where you are in the journey as well. So there were a couple of sneaky ones in there. I wanted to put the slide in here more for you guys just to have as like a takeaway on who invests and when. And so I'm not going to go through all the details at the top, but I really just wanted to run through a couple of these kind of best practices or remember as you are approaching friends and family, angels, VCs, kind of anyone across this entire community of fundraising. First, do your homework on who you're talking to, on what investor you're talking to, whether it's their deal thesis, product preferences, geographies, type of technology, and also try to understand their model to the best that you can. And what do I mean by that? So in some VC groups, they have like a pass the hat model, which means if there's 20 of them in a room and they listen to the new technology, anyone in that room can actually invest, versus a majority rules, meaning the majority of those 20 people need to decide, yes, we're going to invest in Patrick's startup, and that's how those decisions are made. So try to understand as much as possible and really do your homework on the investor. You will spend a lot. There's thousands of potential investors out there. You're going to spend a lot of time and a lot of energy talking to the wrong folks, honestly. So the more you can kind of think through who these folks are and what your audience is, you're going to make your life and their lives much easier. Each of these rounds takes a long time. I'll talk to some CEOs and they're like, well, we're in this round right now. And then in 6 months, we're going to raise another round. And then next January, we're going to do this. And in reality, it actually takes quite a bit longer than that. Think about your ideal team from day one. So you might not be able to hire all of the right people that you want to on day one, but think about what the composition of an ideal team could look like, because as you are meeting all of these different investors, as you are expanding your network, these potential employees and partners of yours are going to be coming like in and out of the circle. And you might meet your potential CTO or a CFO or a CMO in some of these different conversations. So be thinking through what that group actually looks like. I said here, ask for money and get advice. There's the whole adage, and then ask for advice and you get money. Be thinking about fundraising as a long-term goal and as a long game. Just approaching these investors when you are like 2 days before you run out of money and you need to raise this much, not only does it come across as desperate, but you're really trying to build relationships in this community along the way. So you guys can kind of read through the slides and some of the details here. I wanted to talk a little bit about pitching. I think oftentimes people only think of pitching as being super early stage for their company. Like, hey, we pitched, we got some money, and then I don't need to think about this again. But the reality is pitching applies to every stage of your company, different audiences. It's like the most generic term. But when we are thinking about early stage, have any of you guys heard of like the 512 problem?
I have not.
So this means that more often than not, you are going to have at most 5 minutes and maybe 12 slides to present in one of these conversations. Some folks will leave it very structured and they'll say, hey, you have 15 minutes to present and then there's 15 minutes for Q&A, but you should be prepared at any given point in time to have a 5-minute story and to also have a 1-minute pitch as well. And so people are thinking about their whole slide deck and all the information that they want to communicate. But you need to be thinking through all the different lenses and methods by which you need to communicate your information. But it's a good kind of, the 512 is like a good framework to have in the back of your mind for what's like a down and dirty version of what you can build and what you can also pass around to folks. I'm not going to like give you guys, the Ilana's magical template for a killer pitch deck. There's plenty of people on LinkedIn that will sell you some package for $199 and they'll say this will absolutely get your company funded. So I'm not going to do that. What I am going to go through is what I think are really the most important elements of what you need to share in any communication, whether you have an hour or 30 minutes or 5 minutes or 1 minute. And these are roughly in order of importance. I'm going to start with team. Most CEOs and founders want to start with tech, but you want to start with your team. And that's because most investors would rather have, and you'll hear this in big companies, right? I'd rather have an A team with a B technology than vice versa. With a team, they want to see a few things. Certainly domain expertise. And most often the slides that I will see when I'm helping companies is this deep domain expertise. So firsthand knowledge of the industry that you're in. I'll see pictures of people that have, 47 PhDs between them. And like, that looks awesome. But they want to see execution history. So are they seeing a sea of PhDs in all these faces, but they are not seeing anyone who actually knows how to build a company or build a team or scale or exit? And I'll talk about that a little bit when we talk about red flags. They want to understand that your team is the unique team to solve this problem. So what is it about the composition of your people that makes you guys special? And that you have some sort of complementary skills, technical, operational, sales, whatever. And you know what? If you don't have that right now for your company, that's okay. Know that that is a gap. Identify it as a gap. Be willing to talk about it as a gap. And say, hey, listen, as we raise our next round, as we get more established, we would love to hire a blank because we feel like we need that skill set internally. With tech, they want to see, I always call this like, they want to see that you have an unfair advantage. So what is it about your tech that is perhaps defensible? IP, patents, is there some sort of process that competitors can't copy? They want to see scalability. So is there something about your business that will allow for 5x, 10x growth without breaking, forget about breaking the bank, but breaking your process and your team as well? And they want to understand, these like 10x improvements. Can you do something with your product that is better, faster, cheaper, more accurate? In your case, as physicians, is it safer? They want to understand kind of what that looks like as well. Traction is the other one that you'll hear about. And I think people get very nervous when they say, hey, we're pre-revenue. Like, how am I supposed to talk about traction? Like, we have no sales. So what am I supposed to talk about? Think broadly when you think about traction, because it can take a lot of different flavors. It could be customer validation. So if you do have any even early clients paying or not paying, it could be testimonials, it could be case studies. Think about your pipeline. It could be a letter of intent from an institution. It could be a qualified sales funnel, and you actually walk your audience through how you built that sales funnel. It could be work that you're doing with pilot sites. It could be KOLs that you've engaged, regulatory feedback, your presence at society meetings and industry events, and how many meetings you have set up with strategics. So there's a lot of different things that you can actually bucket into that traction category. One company that I'm working with, pre-revenue, but we're focusing a lot and we're talking a lot about our traction as pricing studies that we're conducting, stakeholder interviews with doctors and nurses and CEOs. And then also, I already mentioned society meetings and how many strategics we're meeting with. So again, all of that kind of builds. And then the last one is timing. I think this is one that doesn't get talked about enough, but if you can explain why this is the right time for your company to be successful. So there might be something happening from a regulatory standpoint, from a reimbursement standpoint. It might be things happening kind of at the same time in convergence, but is there something special about the market or readiness that's going to make you successful at this point? I'll give an example. When I was working at J&J, at DePuy Synthes, I was working in the spine business, and specifically within a part of our portfolio that was all around vertebral compression fractures. And at the time, there was this crazy reimbursement code change where docs were going to get reimbursed something crazy like 3x in an in-office setting what they would have made in a hospital setting. So all of a sudden, you have all these docs like starting to do these procedures in office, even though it probably wasn't the right call, right? They didn't necessarily have the safety procedures and all the emergency procedures set up, but all of a sudden you had this like complete explosion of these sorts of procedures being done in this different setting. And so how could we as a company kind of take advantage of that momentum, and what could we do over the next 6 to 12 months to take advantage of that? So always be thinking about kind of those externalities. I put on here some best practices, and some of this is just good advice for working with investors and strategics down the road. In terms of your style, think about your pacing. It's really easy. I feel like I'm actually doing not a great job of it right now because I feel like I'm speaking very, very quickly and racing through all of my information. But think about how you present. It's better to present this amount of information really well than this amount of information, and it kind of goes over people's heads. Keep it simple. I talk about this one a lot, especially when it's physicians, PhDs, really smart people. You guys need to present to what I always call like the lowest common denominator in the audience, to a generalist investor, to a generalist strategic that is not familiar with your space. There's a reason why you guys all went to med school and are doctors now. And there's a reason why most of us dropped out of first semester bio and did not go to med school. So please keep it simple for those of us. I mentioned a little bit about doing your homework and knowing your space. As you are presenting your slides or as you're answering questions, please don't bullshit your investors. One of two things is going to happen. Number one, they're either going to be able to read through it or see through it very quickly and call you out. Or even if they're not able to in that first meeting, they're going to follow up, they're going to pressure test some information that you had on that slide, some number that you had on that slide, and they're going to call you out in the next meeting. And the goal is to build trust early, build that sort of support early. If you don't know an answer, it's okay to say, but just make sure that you're being really authentic and transparent in these conversations. And then the last, I'll just kind of talk about stamina for a second. If you are in the process of fundraising, you are going to get a lot of no's, and practice being okay with that. It's a difficult space. It's a difficult thing to do. Remember, it is not a reflection of your worth as a person, of your worth even as a company as you hear these no's. It's just not a match in that moment, and so that's okay. Filter feedback strategically. If you have 10 meetings with investors, you are going to get 10 different pieces of advice, and they're going to tell you 10 different ways that you should change your deck. Have some trusted advisors in your corner that will help you filter that feedback strategically, because everyone has their own lens, their own slant, and their own reasons for maybe giving you that advice or wanting you to make that change. And then lastly, let the grass grow. And I use that expression. A lot of times CEOs will send you a note and they'll do the, hey, just wanted to check in. And they think that like the, hey, just checking in every month or every 6 weeks kind of keeps you on the radar. Make sure that you have things to share with them in between their check-ins. Hey, Patrick, really appreciated your feedback when we last met in May. I wanted to provide a few updates, most notably 1, 2, 3, and provide that sort of feedback and make sure that you are giving an opportunity for your company and your product to make some progress before that next point that you are checking in with these folks. All right. I wanted to put together a couple of slides on just like red flags of things that I've seen founders, co-founders, or CEOs like actually say in meetings. In reality, it's very rarely just one red flag that kind of gets like your spidey sense up. It's a combination of factors. I kind of call this like the umbrella of entrepreneurial maturity and self-awareness. And I feel like that sounds like such a like therapy speak phrase. But the reality is that companies don't necessarily have every answer. But what investors and what strategics are looking for is the self-awareness to see where your gaps are, or the self-awareness to understand where you don't have all the answers and how you're either trying to find the answers or where you could use their help to find the answers as well. And the flags kind of shift a little bit depending on the stage. So I split them up into early stage and late stage. So depending on where each of you guys are in your journeys with your companies or with your products, you might identify with some of these. So for some of the super early companies, and these are all quotes that we've heard that I don't think sound super outlandish. We have no competitors. You'll ask a company that question and they'll say no one. And that means that they have not thought about that question long enough. Even if the competition is status quo, even if it's do nothing, wait and see, there is always going to be some competition. And so it sounds like kind of like a disingenuous answer. My favorite, and by favorite, I say that kind of facetiously, but like you'll see a slide where you have, a whole grid and you'll have, Lillian's company is on the left and Lillian's company has for every single variable, all green check marks, and every other company has all red X's. And you think to yourself, either Lillian chose very narrow variables of how to compare herself to every other company that's out there. That kind of feels weird. Maybe we should ask some follow-up questions about that. Or it then begs the question, like, if all these other companies or all these other competitors are so crappy, how are they all making money? And so that becomes a red flag just as you start to dive into that one. We can expand to 8 other specialties. I was working with a client earlier this year, and they were so excited to show me the slide that had all of the different, it was a navigation and like a headset sort of product. And they were so excited to show all of the different types of surgeons that could use this product moving forward. And the problem with that is that without any sort of timeline or threshold or story, not just a story on a slide, but even a story internally, that signals a lack of focus to me. So if I'm an investor and I'm thinking about giving you 100 of my dollars, are you going to put $100 in that first beachhead that you're working on right now? Or are you going to peanut butter my money across all 8 other specialties, and then none of those specialties are going to get done? None of those products are going to get done. So pick a beachhead and then think about how you will expand with the right timing and with the right metrics as well. So think about that story. Every patient needs this. It's great if the patient is the one who's writing the check for that product. But if it's a surgeon or a physician who's making the decision, if there's an administrator that's involved, if you have to go through cyber or data or privacy or anybody else at an institution that could like derail the sell, you need to think about that as well. And then the last one is one of my favorites, which is, it's a $100 billion market. In reality, when you see these like crazy numbers, first of all, it's totally unrealistic sizing, right? You can't just say absolutely everybody needs this thing. When you think about 100 billion, I actually looked up at one point. I was like, give me some examples of what else are $100 billion opportunities. That is the size of the entire global smartphone market. So if a company ever comes to you and they say there's a 100 billion opportunity, you could say, wow, you're going to be able to sell as much as every smartphone in the entire world with your product. That's amazing. So, try to be really intellectually honest with some of that. The other thing is, they actually don't care. Investors and strategics don't necessarily care too much about like your TAM and your SAM and your SOM and your percentage of SOM. They care about your methodology. They know that most of your numbers are going to be wrong. They have access to better data sets and better numbers that you have. What they care about is your methodology. So if any of you has either interviewed at a consulting firm or has a family member or friend who's interviewed at a consulting firm, they'll often ask the questions like, how many windows are there in New York? They don't care about whether you get to the number or the right number. They care about, okay, well, I think New York City is about 20 by 20 city blocks, and each block has roughly 10 buildings, and each building has roughly 50 floors. And that's how you do your math. They care about your methodology. They care about your thought process because your thought process for your TAM and your SAM and your SOM and everything else is going to reflect on the thought process that you have for the rest of this company that you are building. A couple of red flags that apply to later stage companies. I have no concerns about scaling. I have heard this one more often than that I should hear it, to be honest. But this is where a startup is claiming that they are ready to scale, ready for global distribution. But in reality, the quality team gets in and maybe they discover that there's some like small component that's sourced from a mom and pop shop. No big strategic, if they're thinking about your company, post-COVID, right, is going to let themselves be at the mercy of a single source vendor. So all of a sudden, you need to think about qualifying new suppliers, your costs go up, your risks go up. One company that I'm working with, and I can't take credit for this decision, for this choice, because it predated me, but they were really clever in that they chose a supplier for their base technology that is already on the approved supplier list of a couple of the big strategics that they would love to get bought by. What a beautiful conversation to be able to have when you are in early diligence with a big company to say, hey, from a quality perspective, we actually chose such and such company that you guys have had on your ASL for the last 8 years. That part is going to be a breeze. That part of diligence is going to be a breeze. Like, what a beautiful story to be able to tell. Rapid adoption is indicative of future revenue. On one hand, that statement makes all of the sense in the world, right? Like, how else are you supposed to think about the future? Of course, you think about like past indicators of success, right? But what's the problem with that? I call it like the subset problem. A startup shows up, they show revenue, and they say, we are in this many accounts and we're doing this much in revenue. But in reality, once you start like, poking under the hood a little bit, maybe 80% of their sales are in one account, which feels much more like a pilot than any sort of real traction. Even worse, if that success, if that revenue is coming from docs that they have on their advisory board, which means there's obviously a financial incentive to be using these products, that looks like that's just like, I don't want to say it's a no-no. It's not a no-no in terms of it happening. It's a red flag in terms of what it could be signaling, because you realize then that the traction that they're getting is perhaps artificial, perhaps it's not scalable. And when you have that growth that kind of looks like that perfect hockey stick, on one hand, it's fantastic, but strategics are then thinking about, well, what are the price points that they offered this product at? Wow, they actually discounted 50% from what they told us. That means that when we pick up this product or this company, we're going to have to double or triple what the ASP is. Otherwise, it's not sustainable. So thinking about like all of that storytelling is actually really important. I'm not worried about the future selling process. Not only does that sound like just a really big kind of inflated statement, but no strategic wants to buy a company that's built on heroes. And what do I mean by that? Your startup might have either you as a CEO or might have one really charismatic, really amazing sales guy or gal that is like living in an OR, to sell this product. They are providing absolutely outstanding support to make sure that the device works and that it's supported appropriately. And unless you are willing and able to hire 100 or 500 of these sorts of sales reps, it's going to be difficult. So you want to be thinking about how to make standardized playbook to be able to train a rep in 2 weeks, train surgeons and nursing staff in 1 hour. How do you make sure that your company and the success of your sales are not built on the heroics of any of these sales individuals? Otherwise, your margins are going to be killed down the road. Similarly, thinking about call points of your product as they fit into the different strategics in their buckets. Again, I'll just continue to use J&J as an example. When I was there, we as a DePuy company bought this other company called Synthes. At the time, it was actually the largest acquisition in J&J history and the largest acquisition in med device history. And we had this entire category of new products, and it was super exciting. And we were all jazzed to, put together marketing collateral that talked about like the breadth of our portfolio and how comprehensive it was, and like, all of these wonderful buzzwords. But we were used to neurosurgeons and orthopedic surgeons, and all of a sudden, some of these products that are going to be sold to interventional radiologists and pain management docs, totally different specialty, different call points, different sites of care, just different profiles of individuals. And we kept trying all these different permutations for how to build a sales force and how to incentivize them and how to get them to sell. And it was super difficult, not because the product wasn't amazing. It just wasn't a natural fit within our current bag. And it wasn't a natural fit for our current sales force. So you need to always be thinking about differences in services, differences in sites. And then the last one on here is I can be the commercial guy too. Or I can be the commercial gal too. Sometimes you'll hear that from technical folks. And listen, some people are really awesome at lots of things, and maybe they can be the commercial person or they can be the finance person. But it could show a lack of that kind of self-awareness, not just of you yourself, of your strengths, but also what the organization needs at different points in time, because that's going to change as your company matures. So the converse of that are all of the green flags. And some of these are just the opposite of what I talked about before. But maybe I'll just talk about the ones that I didn't really touch on too much. The first, I know that I don't want to run a commercial organization. That is a little bit different than I am not the commercial guy for that. What I mean by that first green flag is having a CEO or having a team in place that's really clear about their goals for this organization. In some cases, you have a CEO that says, I want to build this company. I want to run this company. I want to hire a bajillion sales reps. I want to do this until the day that I die. This is my vision for the company. Then I want to pass it on to my kids and my grandkids. That's perfect. That's great. If you do not want that, if you say, you know what, I don't want to run a commercial organization. I want to get to regulatory approval, and then I want to have some strategics kind of waiting on the sidelines, ready to bite and ready to buy me. That's fantastic, because it allows you to make the right decisions at the right points in your process as well. And so having that sort of clarity is super important. I'd love to show you how we use the dollars in an effective and efficient way. What a wonderful, wonderful phrase that is. It is literally saying, hey, between the last time that we spoke and today, whether it's that you gave me $100 or somebody else gave me $100, here's how I've used that money in a really smart way. And you can trust me as a steward of your money moving forward. And even simple phrases like that and positioning of some of your financials really starts to build that trust and build that credibility. And I hadn't considered that. I'd love a follow-up. I can't tell you how many times I would meet with companies, and you'd ask them some follow-up questions in genuine curiosity, and they would not follow up. So what a wasted opportunity. It's kind of like networking or interviewing for a job. What a wasted opportunity to then follow up and say, thank you so much for your question. I took some time to dig into this, ABC, thank you for that, blah, 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 whatever the right follow-up is. So those are some of the things that just earn like very quick trust in your audience. Again, this applies to investors. This applies to strategics. It's just kind of good advice what I think is good advice as you're building your company. And then the last section that I have is strategics. And this is probably my my favorite part because I was on the receiving end. I was that M&A lead for a division or multiple divisions in my prior roles. I know what it's like to be on the receiving end of information. I know what it's like to be involved in diligence. I know what it's like to work with CEOs and teams and be managing their stress and their stress levels through a process. Um, it's a lot of work. It's really difficult. So these are some of the things that I thought would be really helpful for you guys in your entrepreneurial journey. This is probably the most important slide in the deck. The first is, overall, do your homework and be a good student. It sounds really, really simple, but understand who you're talking to in each of these conversations. Please don't show up to an early call with a company having done no research on what they do, what they sell, who their customers are, or how your product fits into their vision. Now, nobody is expecting you to understand the 10-year strategy of the suchity such business unit that you don't even know who the right people are or like how to get access to that information. But look for some public information that's out there on recent acquisitions, areas of focus, leadership. It's amazing how much you can find by kind of looking at LinkedIn, annual reports, investor days, that sort of thing. Understand and help them understand not just why your product is awesome or why your tech is awesome, but why it's going to be awesome for them as a company. You might have built like the most amazing robot in the world, but if they don't have a sales team that can support that, if they don't have folks that are familiar with capital sales or a software team, it might be a tougher or even an impossible sell to that company. Most of the folks on this call, at least the ones that are, physicians turned CEOs or physicians and also CEOs and running a company like in all the free time that you guys have, you guys have a million things that you're doing. And it's really tempting to want to take a whole bunch of these calls with strategics just to get your name out there. But you're really shooting yourself in the foot if you don't take a little bit of time to do your homework and make your presentation at least a little bit targeted to each of these companies. I'm working with a client right now where that's exactly what they're doing. They are about a year and a half away from regulatory approval. It's a surgeon, had a prior exit to a very big strategic, very successful. And now I'm helping them run the entire kind of like BD M&A strategy part, which is thinking about landscape of potential acquirers, how to message to all of these folks in the right way, how to set up meetings with all these folks in the right way. And so thinking through that strategy, but make sure that you are from your very first impression, showing up to these companies in a really like smart and professional way. What do I mean by decode the organizational structure? This one is kind of funny. I've worked in big companies for most of my career, and it's hard enough to understand how your company is organized, even when you have access to like Workday and org charts and all these sorts of things. I really empathize for all of the startups that are out there that are trying to figure it out. But it's really important as you are thinking about how to approach, I'll just say a Stryker versus a J&J versus a Medtronic versus some of these other ones. For example, Stryker really prides itself on its decentralized business structure. There's 7 different commercial divisions. There's 22 or 23 different business units. Each of them has a VPGM. Each of them runs like a fiefdom. So if you want to get in, you need to get into the right BU. People get very excited about going straight to corporate business development, and they want to talk to the head honcho that's there. In reality, the head honcho is not going to do anything for you. You want to talk to the right business developer within that business unit. Make yourself an org chart. That's honestly a lot of what I spend some of my time doing, all to get a picture of what it takes to get a deal done and who are the right folks to engage. And then lastly, find and protect your champion. This is really important. When you do find the right person and you start to build that relationship, remember that this person is putting their political capital on the line for you and your deal. And you do not want to make them look like a chump when they have to present to their own leadership team and present your deal and why they should buy your company, right? You want to provide them the right information in the way that they need it and the way that they ask for it. And once you find that person, please do not spam the entire R&D and marketing and sales and leadership and clinical and corporate BD teams. Don't go over that person's head. It's just going to piss them off. All roads are going to eventually lead to that small team anyway. So build your team, build your trust, and think long term. Maintain this relationship. Again, it's really all about the end game. And so this is my last slide, I promise. Again, like I said, I feel like I'm racing through some of this material, but I get very excited about this stuff. But when big companies are looking at you as a startup, it's similar to dating, right? They're thinking, is this person smart? Is this person funny? Is this person adventurous? Is this person going to fit in with my family? They are thinking through a dozen or so of these different like value variables for things that will either drive or devalue a deal. I included a couple of here, but I will say that if done right, this actually takes a lot of time. And it takes a lot of time for you to figure out how to position your startup, your tech, in a way that is most appealing to that company and what value variables they care about. Now, some of them are going to be the super standard ones, like I listed here. Some of them are going to be, hey, is Catherine's startup going to allow us to expand to a new region or a new market that we're not in for whatever reason, right? So some of them are super simple. But these variables change at different points in time based on where a company is, a strategic is in their own journey. Maybe they are paying down a lot of debt right now. Maybe they just acquired two other huge companies in the last 2 years. Maybe they've had some recall issues. And so they're doing a lot of internal and operational work. Like you need to understand where you fit into their own journey as well. And again, if done right, this can take a lot of time, but this is really what can separate you as a startup from every other startup that is pitching to these strategics. So this is the stuff that I love to do because this is a little bit of like the chess versus the checkers. And this is what I get very excited at helping people do. So I'm going to take a breath right now. I'm happy to stop. I'm happy to take questions. I'm happy to chat about anything that you might have heard about or anything that you didn't hear about anyway. But maybe I'll just um, stop sharing for a second so I can see all of your beautiful faces.
This was amazing and obviously a lot of very valuable information. And I think you kind of answered my question right here. How is AI changing all of this? And I know that there's probably a tendency for some people to just say, oh, I'm just going to throw it in the cloud and see what it tells me about my pitch deck. I think the benefit is incredibly, just glaringly obvious. This is the benefit of working with you. This is
Mm.
the benefit of working with a human because you've got the real world insight and experience that an AI tool does not. Are you seeing people leaning too much on AI as they're getting ready to go in and that sets them up for failure?
So, listen, we should all be availing ourselves of all of these different tools that are out there. I'm sure had I put this presentation into one of those different tools, it would have said, hey, make this slide longer, make this one
Right.
shorter, change this one around. It's really good for kind of like pressure testing good information that you have already.
Mhm.
I think what AI tools don't help you do is know how to navigate the conversations that happen real time. Because
Mhm.
you could have the most beautiful deck, but then when you get into an actual conversation, you are not going to know how to answer that investor's question or the strategic's question in the right way, in a way that is honest, but also in a way that in 30 seconds you can summarize all the information that you actually want to convey to them. And I think that's where some of the nuances come in as well. I think from having seen so many, whether it's so many pitches or having sat through so many presentations, I feel like I can call upon um, a lot of the different examples of like what goes wrong. And then, hey, here's maybe a better way to present this information. And I think by just leveraging some of the tools, you you miss some of that nuance. You're going to get kind of watered down guidance on, here's a chart that you can use, or here's a different way to say it. And then the second answer is, I think a lot of these tools, I've heard the term glazing. You guys might already know what all of that is, which is these tools a lot of times give you like glazed answers, like very positive or optimistic answers or feedback to a lot of your different questions. And so it won't necessarily kind of like poke you and pressure test you as much as needs to be done in a really tough conversation. And I suppose you could then go back and ask your little tool, hey, be harder on me, or ask me harder questions, or whatever the right prompt is. But I think by having someone who's been in it, who's seen deals move forward and not move forward, who's seen, teams sit around and talk about you as a CEO, I think is really valuable. Saying, oh, loved his deck, but oh, Patrick, what a nightmare that guy to be, would be to work with, and understanding what that actually means too, right? So yeah.
This is
Great.
spectacular, Ilana. I know that I'm one of the few that's on here and hopefully not on mute. I can't even find myself. But
No, I can hear you and see you.
okay, good. But no, absolutely spectacular. And if I had to sum it up, and I love it, I love it because you lead with principle. And to me, that is everything, right?
Mhm.
And it's be authentic, show your integrity, show your genuineness, be honest, admit your faults. There is not one human out there who's perfect. Embrace it and say, we
Yeah.
don't know this yet, but it's on our docket, right? Like it's okay to not know, just be genuine, people.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
absolutely right.
Yeah. And so thank you for this because it was very, very effective. And yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, your worth is undeniable.
Yeah. Thank you.
Absolutely. 100%.
Yeah.
Now we do, and there are a few people who I'm not familiar with. I think Palak, this may be one of the first shift change webinars that you've joined, and Rad Mariala is here as well. If either of you want to come off mute and just kind of introduce yourselves, tell us what you're working on. We'd love to hear from you if you're available. If you're not driving and you
Yeah.
can join.
I'm trying to read through the chat a little bit right now
Okay.
as you're going.
Hey, yeah, thank you. First and most important, I got the first question right. I put C. So,
Nice.
uh, no, thank you for that. This was very helpful. I appreciate all the information. Personally, I never tried to raise money for any venture. I tried to bootstrap it. The metric I use is like these lifestyle businesses that you self fund have a much greater chance of success. There are a lot more millionaires who make it in lifestyle businesses that don't try to get seed money, VC funding, stage, 1, 2, 3, ABC or whatever. So more lifestyle businesses make it um, create millionaires than these, what everyone, but you don't hear about them. What you hear about is the unicorns that make it, and everybody's like, oh, I'm going to be the next unicorn. And so I just want to say that no one talks about lifestyle businesses, and maybe that's something that more physicians should think about. Like, hey, you don't need to try to get to $100 million valuation or exit, and like the more likely pathway is that you create a 7 8 figure business that generates positive cash flow for you and your family, and that's a much more likely viable pathway. And so I just love for physicians to kind of take that into account when they plan their startup.
I think it's a really good point, probably for two reasons. Number one, it sets expectations a little bit better. Like, would all of us like to build the next Facebook tomorrow? Sure, right? But in reality, it sets expectations of the majority of these companies are not going to become those unicorns. The second is it also helps to manage how you grow your business and who you start bringing into your business. Most of these VCs and most of the VCs that I talk to, they're like, hey, Alana, it would be great if you could help with this portfolio company. They're really struggling with this. I'd love to introduce you, blah, 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 blah. They're at like, 10 or $20 million, but like, we really want to amp it up to, 500 and see what we can do in the next couple of years. And you're like, and then I'll talk to the CEO. And one CEO I talked to, he's like, I have no intention of doing that, but I'm getting all of this pressure from the board
Mm.
and from these investors to grow the business. And like, that's not what I want to do as well. That's a totally different path than what I'm trying to go down. So picking your investors, like picking those people around you is really important. There are some investors, I was on a call with one of them yesterday, actually. He said, we are not looking for unicorns. We are looking for moderately sized exits. We are looking to write smaller checks to more companies. But as a result, like we are able to invest in a ton of these different companies. And like, we know that they're not going to be the $1 billion, and like, we're okay with that. But that's the flexibility that we have with our dollars. And it was such like a refreshing
Wow.
conversation because it was a much lower ego-driven conversations than what most of these are. You know, most of these investors that and I don't know if you guys have seen all of this, so please jump in. I'd love to hear your thoughts, but you know, there's like this major imbalance in the market where these investors and these VCs kind of have like well, you need money and we have the money. And so I am more important and more powerful. And no offense if there's any VCs on the call right now. But you have this imbalance. And so it was so refreshing to talk to this guy yesterday. We've had a few calls at this point where there was like no ego to this conversation. He said, we want to fund and we want to build good companies and surround ourselves with good people. And we don't need it to be unicorns. So I think for those two reasons, kind of the expectations in both of those directions, I think it's really important. So agreed.
Well, Ilana, I'll go ahead and throw it out. I'd love to speak to that person.
Yeah.
If you'd be open to making an introduction
Yeah.
for
Great guy.
several reasons. One, to be able to connect them and other Shift Change members together. And then I'd love to have a conversation with them myself.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Rad, thanks
Hi.
for jumping in. I'm gonna kind of talk on Rad's behalf right here. He's built several different companies, many of whom, you know, kind of focusing on physician offices and clinics and helping physicians. So I think that he really has that servant mindset and really trying to serve other, you know, colleagues and developing business that help physicians be more prosperous and be more successful. He just started his MBA program at Rice, and I'd asked him to put a post up inside of Shift Change just to kind of share a little bit about that journey and why he's doing that, and kind of the pros and cons of pursuing an MBA. Because it is a big investment, not only in time, but also financially. So Rad, thanks for being here and doing what you do to support your colleagues and sharing a little bit about your story.
Thank you for your kind words. So refreshing. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Patrick is like the best hype man
Yes.
ever. You should do all the intros for all of us at every meeting.
Well, you know, and that's a big part of the reason that, you know, that I've created this is because we are doing so many great things, and to be able to share the word, and you know, a rising tide lifts all ships, and you know, that's something that's somewhat foreign and alien to us in our medical training. It's, you know, I'm doing this alone. No, I'm not going to share my notes with you. I've got to do better than you on that next test. And that mindset is just such bullshit. And really just trying to help each other, because we all benefit when one of our colleagues succeeds, and making these connections and really just trying to help each other out through this very difficult journey that we're all navigating. So it's an honor to be able to do it, and it's a lot of fun.
It is. It's way more fun together.
Awesome. Well, we'll go ahead and wrap this up. But Ilana, thank you for being here and sharing your expertise and insights. And whoever is watching this, either live or in the replay, please reach out, connect with Ilana, have a discussion, see what she might be able to do to help you. If you have not yet joined Shift Change, this is what we talk about. This is the environment, the ecosystem that we are all creating together. I'm just facilitating it, and would love to have you join. You can go to myshiftchange.com, connect with me on LinkedIn, let me know what I can do to help you, and we look forward to seeing you inside the community. Thank you, everybody, for joining.
Thank you so much, Patrick. Nice meeting all of you. And I see my info is in here, so please feel free to reach out and just let me know that you were on this call, just so I have a little bit of context. And yeah, hope to meet more of you soon.
Awesome. Thanks.
Bye. Bye, guys.